So how did you become a journalist? I guess start from your college and I guess go on to where you are now.
Sure. So when I was in high school, I worked a little bit on the school newspaper, and then in college, I enjoyed doing journalism. Both my parents were journalists, so I wanted to keep that going. So in college, I worked on both the political magazine and some work for the daily newspaper at school. And then summer after my junior year, I interned at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and was on the Metro desk there, so covering just daily affairs in the city. Summer after senior year at the Denver Post, I interned and covered trials there, so some court coverage. Then I took a job at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and after a brief stint there, joined up at Politico, where I am now. Started by covering the federal budget, and then moved over to campaign coverage, which is, I think, when you first got in touch with me while I was covering Governor Mike Pence's campaign for vice president.
So the journalistic process. So what do you do? Do you just do research? Do you interview people? How does the process work?
Sure. So, it's a lot of talking to people, basic research, statistics, that sort of stuff we use a little bit, but a lot of it's interviewing people and being on the ground, being where you can actually talk to the actors, see them in action. So following Mike Pence around, I was embedded with the campaign with a few other reporters. So we would fly with him and his staff to various events around the country. We'd have conversations with his staff, conversations with people attending these rallies, and obviously certainly cover what he was saying in his speeches. So, it's a fast-moving process, especially on the campaign trail when you've got multiple events a day. And, a lot of times they're saying the same thing over and over, but there's other stories going on outside what's happening on stage. But it's a lot of fun. It was a crazy campaign, as I'm sure you guys all know.
Yeah, I was surprised. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting note. What did you major in college in order to become a journalist?
So I majored in history. A lot of people major in journalism or come from all various majors like I did. But I was always really interested in both writing and in politics. And history enabled me to do both of those things. And obviously, journalism, you're kind of writing history's first draft, as the cliche goes. So you're on the ground there, catching it right when it happens. And it's up for the historians to come back in a decade or two or more and weave it all into a broader narrative. But getting to be there on the ground and having a sense of history when you're doing this sort of stuff obviously helps. So you're not just seeing the campaign in a vacuum on a day-to-day basis, but you're kind of able to put it in the broader context of past campaigns.
How is your schedule like? I guess at Politico, is it super busy or everywhere all the time? Do you need to type up articles fast, tight deadlines, or?
So journalism's definitely a very deadline-driven job, especially now in the online era. It used to be with newspapers that would come out once a day. In the morning, you'd have your deadline at night, and you'd get your story in by 5 or 6 or 7, and that was that. But these days, you get a story up when the news happens, and then you're updating it with more details as the day goes on. But these days, we're very busy. Obviously, throughout the campaign, it was just a 7 days a week news cycle, and that sort of continued on into the transition. But fortunately, we've got a big team and a lot of people covering it, so that definitely helps.
So Politico is an online subscription, and you said you worked for a newspaper in the past, correct?
That's right, yeah.
So which one, in your opinion, is, I guess, better?
Well, that's a good question. I think everything is sort of becoming an online news outlet because print circulations are just going down so much. That's not to insult newspapers. I obviously love newspapers. But being at a place like Politico, which really embraces digital journalism and fast-moving journalism, getting things out there quick, and sort of being on the cutting edge of things, alerting things on phones, all of that has been really cool. It's only been around since 2007 or 2008, Politico, so it doesn't come with some of the baggage that some of the legacy costs that some print publications have. So it's freer in that sense.
Okay, now in today's media, Politico is independent, correct? It's not owned by a parent company.
That's correct.
I believe, if I remember correctly, most of the media today is controlled by like what 6 or 7 companies, or just a very small amount. So, what's your opinion on the state of journalism today?
Well, that's a big question, but a good question. I think you've obviously got the 5 networks, and a lot of people, when they think of media, they think of those networks and television journalism. And I think there are certainly negative things to be said about 24/7 cable news and what it does to a news cycle. We have such short news cycles now that something really controversial will happen. It'll dominate the news for 12 hours, 24 hours, and then people move on. But overall, I think the media writ large gets a bad rap. I think it's a difficult job, and it's all the more difficult in this fast-moving era. But I think, the major publications out there, and I'd include Politico among those for national politics coverage, but the Washington Post, the New York Times, those publications, I think did overall a very good job during the 2016 election cycle. I think journalism is adjusting with some growing pains, but adjusting to the new digital era. It's been sad to see some local newspapers, a lot of local newspapers struggle so much with declining print revenue, but I think the national news media is gaining its footing here and learning to cope in this new age.
Good question.
Yeah.
Yep.
I kind of just want to ask a question. So we interviewed another journalist before, or he was like in the journalism business, and asked him about like how his coverage or the things that he coverage like influenced his opinions about things. I was going to ask the same thing about you. Like you covered Mike Pence's campaign, so I was wondering, just like, was that experience of just being there with like every single like speech he did, or every campaign thing he did, like did that like more humanize him to you, or like?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think when you're with these people every day, you see them not only on stage giving these speeches, but you also see them traveling between events. You see them meeting with staff, meeting with fans in the audience. I think that certainly brings a more human element to it all. And I think we try to convey that in our journalism. I think that's part of our job, to make sure people know these are 3-dimensional people. They're not just the person you see on stage. But you obviously don't want to get so caught up in that you're ignoring the things they're actually saying and the policies they stand for. So I think that's sort of a balance to be had. But it's certainly a goal to make sure that these people come across, again, as 3-dimensional people. But in their institutional role, you have to look at their actual acts and public statements and go off that.
And so this is like kind of like off topic, or like not like connected to my other question, but it's just what skills like have you gained from just like being in your field, and like how are those different from like the skills you learned just like in college? Like how much did you just have to learn by yourself?
That's a good question. I think a lot of journalism, and I think that I say this as a positive, but you learn it by doing it. So I think I learned the most skills for journalism while interning at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and then of course later at the Denver Post, by being in a newsroom, by taking place in the daily craziness that is a newsroom. You just learn so much about doing this craft that is journalism. And as I said, it's very deadline driven. I think that's sort of obvious. And you don't get that same sort of experience in school. Maybe in a journalism class, you've got a week to produce a paper or something like that. But daily journalism, when you're just pumping things out, that's sort of an experience that you have to have working there. But I also think a great way to get those skills is just by reading the news, by reading high-quality news sources. I think anyone who wants to be a journalist should be reading the New York Times every day, because there's no better journalism out there on a day-by-day national and international scope than the New York Times. And reading good journalism and saying, this is what makes this so powerful and this is what makes this so effective is a great way to learn how to do it. But a lot of things like interviewing people, which is sometimes a combative role, a lot of those things just have to be learned by actually getting out there doing it, messing up sometimes, and learning from all those experiences. And of course, like so many things, having good mentors, so good editors, good senior reporters, that helps a lot. And that's the kind of thing you get at internships and at any of these places.
So like, would you say that like college is more advantageous because like you learn so much stuff there, you get like a context for everything, but also it's like a medium for you to actually get work experience, like in internships? Would you say like that's definitely like a benefit of actually going to college?
Absolutely. I mean, I think just to be able to get into a lot of journalistic jobs, you have to go to college, and you get so many intangible skills at college, which then translate it into these jobs very well. So learning how to manage your time, learning how to manage a workload, juggling multiple things at once. Because in college, you're taking a lot of different classes with a lot of different assignments. And in the journalism business, you're typically juggling multiple stories at once that you're working on. So I think, and as you mentioned, having the context, a broader worldview for which you get in college then is so valuable in journalism, I think is really crucial. And then in just sort of a more tangible aspect, having the avenue to these internships and these jobs helps a lot. And college newspapers are a great way to learn the craft and to hone it with good mentors and in sort of a smaller community. And I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Nick, do you have any questions or no?
I'm good.
You're good? Should we just talk about the election?
Sure.
Give it to him. All right. So usually the media portrays Mike Pence as a very conservative sort of man. Since you've like been keeping up with him for the past election cycle, what are some like misconceptions about him?
Well, that's a fascinating question. I think the general narrative about him, that he's very conservative, both economically and socially, is accurate. I don't think he would quibble with that. I think he demonstrated that both in Congress and as governor of Indiana. I think the fact that he is very on message is something that's seen as advantageous, especially on the Trump campaign, where the president-elect Trump has a little bit more trouble staying on message and maybe saying things that don't get him in trouble. Mike Pence has always been very good at hammering home a message and maybe not answering your question, but certainly not getting himself into trouble. And I think he knows that he's going to be playing a crucial role in the months and years ahead, both as, again, that sort of steadying force that he was on the campaign in the administration, and being a bridge for Donald Trump, who has no military or government experience, to the Congress and to people who, well, to really just the political establishment. That's something that Mike Pence understands. He has governed. He has a lot of relationships there. So he's going to be playing a crucial role in that respect.
Yeah, I got some. On the idea of like the political outsider, like today in Gov, like there's something interesting. Our teacher was talking about how like there's been an increase on like government outsiders in government, as in like not senators or congressmen, mostly just governors. Like it's like Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Reagan, all that. And so like I'm just like through your years in like journalism, have you like observed that trend or like have like thought of it?
Yeah, I think we certainly are seeing right now a moment in which outsider is a very attractive thing. People are fed up or seem to be fed up with the political establishment. I think we saw that on the Democratic side in Bernie Sanders' campaign, and we certainly saw that writ large on the Republican side and nationally with Donald Trump's campaign. So I think it was, as people, I think are accurately saying, a change election. A lot of people were just voting for something new, which the electorate is wont to do every once in a while. So I think having that outsider status is hugely advantageous. And I think that's not necessarily new in American politics. Like you mentioned, George W. Bush was a Texas governor. Bill Clinton came from Arkansas. Neither of those guys had served in Washington. Neither had Reagan. And that's, then you can run against Washington, which is so helpful to be able to say, I'm going to come in there, I'm going to reform the place, I'm not tied down there. It's very different once you get there and you're operating within this system. I think we're already seeing that with Donald Trump's transition. A lot of the people working on that are familiar faces to Washington. It's not some outsider renegade transition, though there are some outsider folks on there. But yeah, I think generally you're going to see it's easier to run against Washington and to say you're anti-establishment and anti-Washington than to run as a creature of Washington. If you look at the last senator who was elected president, that's Barack Obama, and he'd been in the Senate for two or 3 years when he announced his run. He didn't even serve a full term. So I think it's hard for someone who's a longtime creature of Washington to then get elected president. I think Hillary Clinton is obviously a prime example of that.
So what are your thoughts on the election? Because Hillary Clinton, at least for most, not all the polls, they said she was going to win, and she lost. So what do you think were some responsibilities? Like how did she lost, I guess?
Yeah, so it's a fascinating question how everyone seemingly got it so wrong because the polls were wrong. And a lot of states where she was expected to win relatively easily, of course, she ended up losing. And the question of why she lost is going to be a fascinating question for historians to look at. And we already, I think, have some answers, and I don't know how accurate they are, but a few things that people are pointing to. One is the late letter from James Comey, the FBI director, talking about reopening that email investigation. I think Secretary Clinton sees that as a prime reason she lost. It may be that there were some undecided voters or some Republicans who were going to stay home who that pushed them into Donald Trump's camp. There might have been some Democrats leaning towards her who, when that came out, decided, you know what, they're both corrupt, I'm not voting. So it's hard to know how much of an impact that had, but I think certainly it did have an impact. I think there were some, whenever a candidate loses, people immediately say, you know, oh, they ran a bad campaign. So I don't think that's totally fair. But I think when you look at the fact that Hillary Clinton did not, I don't think she visited Wisconsin after the convention and she lost there. I think if you look at ad spending in Wisconsin, the fact that she didn't campaign a whole lot in Michigan or even in Pennsylvania, I think those issues are legitimate ones. I think they ran a campaign modeled after President Obama's two victories in a lot of ways, which is you rely on the Obama coalition, educated whites and minorities and young people, especially in metropolitan areas, so cities and their suburbs, running up big totals there that can offset losses in more rural areas, and that's how you win. And they did a pretty good job of running up big totals in the big urban and suburban areas, Miami-Dade and Florida, Philadelphia, and Pennsylvania, but they just fared so badly outside cities and in these rural areas that it wasn't enough to offset it. And in the end, Donald Trump performed better with some groups than people expected him to. He won white women, which was not expected. He performed better among African Americans and Latinos than Mitt Romney did 4 years ago, which, considering some of his incendiary rhetoric, was surprising to people. So I think, a few points difference in some of those demographics and in some of those states was enough to swing the election to him.
Last question.
So just keeping like the theme of like what our club is like just like what you did to like get your career and everything. So it's just you talked about how you went from like internship to like to more experience until you got to Politico. So it's just like wondering like how well did college sort of prepare you for that?
Well, really well. I think, again, there's sort of the basics of college, which is learning to manage your time on your own and all the new responsibilities that come with, living on your own and not having the same daily regimented schedule that you have in high school is hugely important. And the workload is different. You have a class maybe 1 or 2 days a week instead of every single day. So again, learning how to use your own time wisely to do schoolwork is hugely important. But college also gives you an opportunity to follow a lot of different interests you have, which I would recommend. You don't want to necessarily go in saying, I'm positive that I'm going to major in X, Y, or Z. Freshman year and sophomore year are really useful to explore a lot of different things, get a taste for a lot of different things, and then whatever career you go into, and it's certainly the case in journalism, it helps to have a little bit of a background.
Sorry, that's our bell.
Oh, that's no problem. Well, hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No,
Oh, you can keep
we
going.
can-
I'm
we can
sorry,
keep
yeah.
going. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, so as I was saying, just having multiple interests in different areas, college gives you an opportunity to explore that with really smart people and really creative people, both your professors and your fellow students, and that's hugely valuable wherever you go after that and whatever you end up doing professionally.
Is that it?
So yeah.
Oh, you have more? No,
I think. Yeah.
Okay,
I don't
we
have
can
more
take.
questions.
Can we take a picture with you really quickly?
Sure.
There's a little projector over there, so we're just gonna.
You're just
Yeah, we're gonna.
take a
Yeah, it's
picture
gonna be
with your
awkward, but yeah.
projector.
Perfect. Got it.
I gotta move this because sometimes this annoys me. This is there. Just move that there. Nick, wanna go? Miss Leanne. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Hour period 3.
Shirt down.
Oh, okay, yeah, I just didn't know that. No,
Oh, you did?
Ready, 1.
If I get the photo, it adds to the person.
Okay. I wasn't here. I was up for 1 second, but
1,
You know.
2, 3.
1 second. This happens on hide from broadcast. Present to. Okay.
1, 2, 3. All right. Great. Rumi, you can explain. We normally get more, but it's, Thanksgiving time, right?
Thanksgiving, yeah, vacation. Oh yeah. All right. Thank you so much for talking. I can send you the link to this interview if you want me to.
Oh, awesome. Perfect. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Yeah.
All right. Good
All right.
luck.
All right. I'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.